Welcome back to this week's episode. This week I have another beautiful guest that I cannot wait to share with you. I've got Miss Vicki Abadesco here, and she's the executive director of Soul Shop, which I cannot wait for her to share with you. She is a beautiful human doing work in this world to create safe and bully-free school environments, as well as being a part of elementary school communities. So Vicki, welcome. I'd love for you to share a bit more about Soul Shop, how you got into this, and who you be in the world.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Hello, everybody. I am Vicki Abadesco. And here's what I want to share to start. When I was a kid, I was kind of a sad, lonely, scared little kid. And when I started to grow up, I had this thought that life could be different. I wanted life to be different. And I was surprised by this thing of life. And so there's a saying that our greatest wounds are our greatest gifts. And so it's been a really beautiful privilege for me to be on my own personal journey in my own healing and transformation, to be able to take the wounds of my childhood and my life and to turn them into a beautiful, beautiful gift.
Mm.
And so that gift, right? So many of us, right, I know we talk about purpose here, and right, when you think about what is your purpose? What is purpose? And so for me, what I get is I get to live this life, live my purpose, which is create safe places for people, to create spaces where people feel they belong and where people can be themselves. And
Mm.
the vehicle in which I get to do that is inside of this organization that I created called Soul Shop. And we specifically do it in elementary schools, that amazing time where we learn and question, do I belong? Do people like me? Who are my friends on the playground? Right? Who am I hanging out with? Right? Where's my connection? And even how do I work out my problems? Right? That playground is that place where we learn about friendships, connections, how to make a friend, how to lose friends, right? All of these experiences. And so many of us had great experiences on playgrounds. And there's a lot of us that didn't have so great of experience on those playgrounds. And so that is what drives me. It feels like that's my purpose. It's the work that I do in the world. And it's what I've been doing, not just inside a soul shop for 25 years, but what I've done in my entire career as an educator, which is close to 40 years now.
Vicki, that's incredible. And one, I don't think it changes that much as we're adult. We're looking to belong. We're looking for our friends. We're looking to be understood and heard and feel safe on the playground. Our playground has got bigger, and so I want to come back around to that, but also your dedication and devotion. I mean, even in the words that you're saying, you can hear the passion behind the love for it,
Mhm.
and how important to create these structures in schools. Because I don't know about you, like I felt like I got the fast track to personal development about 7 years ago. And I don't know where I had been with all of it, but it definitely wasn't taught in school where we were. It isn't taught in school now. We're so focused on things that, yes, can be important, but I really don't think in the end encourage us to be better as humans with our heart and our capacity to be empathetic and be inclusive and be more loving beings, so that what we ripple out is what we receive and vice versa, right? That infectious capacity to have emotional intelligence. And I know a lot of your work is built around that.
Mhm.
And I think in general, it's not going to be a separate conversation for those adults who are listening in now, because we
Right.
get to lead by example. And I know that's one of the things with my own children, who are now older, 19 and 26, but
Mhm.
we grow together. There
Yeah.
was a time where I wanted to be able to be that example in a new way. And the best way that I can construct to do that was to do it through me, to be the example without
Yeah.
anyone else having to change. And I feel like that changed the trajectory of my life as well. So I
Mhm.
know I've been in spaces with you. I feel like I gotta like, okay, what are we talking about here? But we've been in so many spaces of growing together and even where we've met in a beautiful live event space. I've had the privilege of you speaking your heart and your growth in your business and what your vision for the future is in it, but also now impacting the children who were once in your program
Yeah.
and having them making impact in the world. That full circle moment for me as just witnessing that was huge. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because you have been doing this for so long, you know, how do you find the flow of that going for you now as you're growing in your own capacities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I want to say that, right? Everybody listening and you, Michelle, right? It's like who we be, right, is always having an impact, right? And even like who you be as a parent, who you be as even a parent that, other kids get to see, right? Your kids, right? And I have no doubt that you have great relationships with all of them, right?
Yes.
Your kids' friends, their parents, their families, right? Because it's just who you be, right? And how I know you to be, right, is incredibly generous, right? Incredibly thoughtful. And
Mm.
so, right, it's like in this particular work, right, being able to bring my presence forward, right? I think one thing you're pointing to is like the importance of role modeling,
Yeah.
right? And every young person needs really beautiful, strong role models of generosity, thoughtfulness, kindness, empathy, understanding, compassion. Right. And so when I think about, I started my career super early. I was like 21 years old. I got thrown into my very first classroom to teach life skills. Right. And I was like, what did I know at 21 years old about life skills?
Awesome.
Right. And so there I am, trying to figure out curricula, right? And really, what did these young people need at the time? They just need an adult to be present with them, an adult who was really willing to listen. And I was like, oh, this is life skills, right? What am I listening for? What can I really hear? These are not troublemaker kids or bad kids, right? These are young people who have a lot of feelings that they don't know what to do with, right? And like all of us, we got really big feelings.
Yeah.
Like we will do things that are hurtful to ourselves or to other people because we don't know how to express ourselves. And so then
Yeah.
be able to build those kind of relationships and connections, and then come, how many years later, and to see so many of those young people turn into adults who are doing what, right? They're in positions now where they're bringing more compassion, a depth of listening, a depth of presence into the workplace, right? And I have, attorneys and doctors and social workers and educators and therapists and all kinds of, right, different industries, but they bring this level of presence of being that we got to experience together.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so ever expansive. And when you hear the words, it's easy for the mind to skip over and say, oh, just presence, whatever. But even in that, like, funny, the mind it's a good idea. Even in that, you know, there's a nestling into the presence when we're not worrying about what we're saying next or when we're speaking next, when we really can actually listen and hear and not just listen to talk to the next thing we're going to be saying, it's a skill. And so even though the mind may want to skip over that or we want to simplify it, it is very simple, but it's not always easy. And so being willing to look at ourselves and have that responsibility and teach our youth as well to listen, to hear, and then the adults to also listen and hear in a world that teaches us, well, you should do what I say because, that's the way we grew up or that's the way we learned it. I think there was a moment for me where it's like, that's not working. And
Yeah,
I didn't like it.
right.
So it doesn't mean that the kids rule the roost, but they have very intelligent, thoughtful, intuitive
Incredible.
things that they don't know what to do with if they don't have an outlet to be heard or to work their magic or to paint or to express it in any way. And so I think there's such a value, especially today, in these conversations where our attention is being vied for in so many different directions, or we're being constantly told who we should be, how we should be, what we buy, what we do, all these things that are supposed to define who we are, and the kids are on social media
Yeah.
24/7. How are
Yeah.
they supposed to know who they are when that's just being bombarded in what you're supposed to be, the shoulds, need tos, or have tos?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm here helping adults unwind that after 40, 50 years. And
Yes.
you're on the other side preventing so much of, not everything, but obviously as much as we can so we can converge. It takes both.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what do you find when it comes to creating more empathy and peace in ourselves and in the world is the magic sauce with that?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things like I love working with adults because I run my nonprofit for most of the day, and then I have a handful of coaching clients that I work with. And most of the people I work with, there's some incredible thread between right, what they do. Most people I work with are in some kind of leadership role. And so they are looking for either a change or they're trying to get more visibility in their workplace or right, they're struggling with a team or something like that, right? And so they're working on themselves to be able to advance or change a job or do something different. And so one of the interesting through lines for me always is to again be present and listen to where and how long these issues have been occurring. And it will take us always back to the playground. So, right, so we're just like, wow, it's all just one big playground, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm not listened to. Oh yeah, I'm heard. Or oh yeah, they don't really see me. Okay, so where does this thread? Is this the first time you haven't felt like you belonged or have been seen or felt invisible? Right? Let's talk about where does this start?
Mhm.
Right? And so many of them could talk about what's happened in their family, what happened in that playground in those much, much early years. So when we thinking about how do we heal from some of these traumas, and again, right, I know we're also in a conversation that some of those things are beyond this lifetime for so many of us as well. And yet in this human experience of ourselves in these bodies today, right, we also have these very personal traumas and wounds. And so many people want to get beyond that. And so when I say something like our greatest wounds are our greatest gifts, right? My question always is, are we leading from the wound or are we leading from the gift?
Right. And so I'm hearing it in my own language and saying, are we going back and living in the past? Or are we actually present with what is and creating more of how we want to feel?
Yeah.
Like, and I love that because I had a lot of work in trauma work and neurotransformation and NLP where like it blew my mind and how I was speaking to myself and how words become, I mean, powerful, right? They become reality because they are the thing that is constantly on replay. We were just talking about like having social media in our face, right? Our internal
Yeah.
dialogue creates so much of the possibility or the non-possibility of reality based off the beliefs and the limitations that we embody. So some of my biggest wounds were the ones I gave myself because I picked up something that I decided at a certain age I couldn't do or wasn't for me or I didn't belong. And then I continued to spin that for decades. So unwinding that is not always comfortable, but it also isn't permanent, which is beautiful because we have these mechanisms within us called emotions that actually are the key codes, in my opinion, going through those emotions to be able to realize there's other emotions that we can also choose. We're not stuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I went through the work of healing from wounds and realizing we can also create beyond just the healing
Yeah.
that it opened up a perception in my mind that just didn't exist before. So I love that you're teaching these young ones. They're remembering, we're still gonna life's gonna life, chaos is gonna chaos. But I think you were talking, and I see it behind you, the balloon, there's something that they remember. There's a imagery, there's something that can bring them back to, hey, I think I learned this or talked about this somewhere. What if I try it now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, when you were sharing a powerful story around the balloon, which I hope you'll share, that even 20 years later, the seed was planted, that they can
Mm.
come back and do something with those thoughts that are going to be more of a benefit to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we, teach this incredible metaphor of the balloon, right? It's a place we put our feelings we don't know what to do with. And right, that balloon gets really full with all kinds of feelings because again, right, in our world, we're not really taught to talk about the hard things, right? We don't have language to talk about them. So what do we do with that, right? So for most of us, we just kind of shut it down, right? We keep it down. Sometimes it just kind of sticks with us. Sometimes but there's not like a lot of sometimes we don't feel like we have control, right? And so even you can see this, it's like, who's in charge? You or your balloon, right? And it's a simple thing we ask the kids because it's sort of
Yes.
like, you got this balloon and who's responsible? It's your balloon, right? And so, oh yeah, I can leak my balloon, hurtful and harmful things, right, to other people, or I can take a responsibility and empty it in a way that's helpful. Right.
Mm,
And so to be able to teach these distinctions, right, to the kids so that they also know that it's their balloon, it's not them, it's not personal in that way. We all have a full balloon, right? And when we ask them, when you go home and whoever the adults are at home, do you know when the adults have a full balloon? Those kids are like, oh yeah, they do this, they do that. Oh yeah, no, 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 right? Right? So like the kids know. And so again, it's like returning back to like their wisdom.
mhm.
They know something really powerful, right? So it's like, so now notice your own balloon. Oh, right. So that just really intimate and helpful way for them to understand themselves, right? And I shared, a few different stories about, the balloon, and one was, going to a school and a kid, um, raised their hand and wanted to share what was in their balloon. And all the kids were just like, why are you sharing? You're the one that fills up everybody else's balloon. All right. So this kid was like labeled like a bully at their school. And so when this little girl came up and she wanted to share what was in her balloon, all the kids were shocked because they, only knew that this was the kid who ruins games, pushes people around on the playground, gets suspended all the time, gets benched all the time. Right. And again, that's what we learn. You do something bad, you go get separated from everyone else. You don't belong. Go sit
Right.
on that bench, go have a timeout. Right. And so this kid is like, you know, mayhem on the playground. Right. And again, we're talking about an 8-year-old who's ruling a playground. So one, we got to talk about that. But anyway,
Right.
that's a different story. That's a different story. Anyway, this poor little sweet little girl, right, just talks about how she lost her best friend. And again, the whole, we're talking like 100 kids in this room don't know, like she doesn't have a best friend. She's the bully. And then she says that her grandmother died. And then in that moment, something else happened. Right. So she got little tears in her eyes. She got to share about her grandmother, and the whole room went quiet.
Mm,
And just a moment ago, she was the bully. And now a different moment happens, a moment where empathy gets to be an action, understanding gets to be present, compassion and care are extended. And so now, instead of being called the bully, there's another possibility. And so, and it's like to see that kind of level of transformation and change. right? And in a single moment, that whole school and that whole life of that girl transformed. She started to see herself as a bully and so treated other people that way. And imagine the trajectory of her life if it would have continued that way.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And we're really talking about the frequency of love,
Yeah.
passion, not fear, right? And there have been studies and books on forgiveness. Desmond Tutu wrote the book of, I can't remember the title. Mm, it's on forgiveness. But they went to a, studies with the jail cells and spoke to the inmates and their practice of forgiveness and unconditional love, and how that was strong enough to heal any old wound,
Yeah.
to release them from the torments of pain. And when we can remember that, it's not love like the love between two people. It's deeper. It's the divine love. It's this grander experience of when we can have that grace and compassion for ourselves, for others. We almost open a window, like a secret window, for someone to see that in themselves that they couldn't before. And it
Yeah.
inspires and it gives hope. And imagine that rippling over and over and over again, you know? With adults, in my experience, it's the freedom to, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I could feel this peaceful in my body.
Mm,
I'm no longer fighting the resistance of what I thought I had to hold on to,
yeah.
the belief, their own stories.
Yeah.
And teaching in my work, we do three roles: the victim, the bully, and the rescuer, and how our behavior can be these things. The behavior of others can activate triggers, but we're not the behavior.
That's right.
It's a thought loop. And our thoughts don't rule us. The mind doesn't even rule us. We're the one observing everything, and that we have so much power within us that we don't realize. And so I really love that at the ages you're able to reach these kids, that you're giving them a new perspective and a new way to experience their own beingness and
Yeah.
become that next generation of leaders. Because,
Yes.
we were talking before, the importance of leadership from inside out. It really does begin. It begins with every one of us, not just the kids changing, but the adults changing, and then the language in the middle,
Yeah.
or the language with the coworker, or the language, like what are we operating from? Are we
Yes.
blaming? Are we complaining? Or are we actually being what we want to have be ripple out in the world?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
where does that
Yeah.
take? Yeah.
When I think about leadership from the inside out, it's
Mm,
right. It's growing ourselves as leaders, and what does that really mean? And so, oftentimes, it's how do we extend compassion to ourselves, right? How do we have our own sense of um, self-understanding?
mm,
And it takes courage, right? And so I love that you were talking about forgiveness, because when I think about inside out, it's extending kindness to ourselves,
mhm.
extending forgiveness to ourselves, grace to ourselves. And what I know about humans is, right, it's like we're a generous, generous people. And if somebody came to us and needed our support and care, most of us will extend it, right? That we will find a way to help another human that was brave enough to ask us. And so then there's a way of like, oh, are we that generous with ourselves? Right? And what are some things that we continue to be hard on ourselves with? Right? We talked earlier about the power of our words and the power of our language, right? What's our own internal dialogue? And again, right, if we experienced exclusion, bullying, teasing, any hurtful
And
behavior,
regret.
trauma as a
Mhm.
kids, how are we still doing that to ourselves today? That
Because
kid
we are.
needed cared and it's and compassion then. Can we
Yeah.
extend that to ourselves now?
Well, gosh, and you and I are in a business mastermind, and over 2 weekends ago, just before the hurricane hit, we were there for 5 days in person, and there's still ways we find that we're doing that. And I think one of my biggest messages too is like, it's okay. You're human. It's part of being human. And as you begin to like get to the depth of you, there's going to be another depth, and there's going to be more love, and there's going to be more perception. You're just never going to run dry.
Yeah.
And so if we start falling prey to the mind saying, that's it, that's enough, that's all I deserve, then we are once again in a wound of some kind that's preventing us from loving even deeper. And oftentimes it starts within ourselves. I think it was the biggest resistance I had in this fast track of personal development this last 7 years. It's only really been 7 years, but the potential was always there. The wisdom was always there. The inner me that wanted to be that loving, harmonic presence for people was always there. And now it can be so much more powerful because I'm allowing it to be within me. And I don't tolerate, I've actually decided to participate in that same grace and compassion versus it's all for everyone else and not for me, which is so good. So we've got the train coming, guys. So Vic, tell me about the importance about caring for our own little kids with that.
Yeah, I think just as we were saying, right? It's like, if any of you were out on that playground with those kids or in that room with that one sweet girl that I was just sharing about, it's like your heart would have cracked open. Right. And again, knowing that we are compassionate beings and I just always want to be the invitation for all of us to really be able to nurture that little kid within us. Right. What do we need? So sometimes when we're feeling having an upset or a trigger or something's going on with us, sometimes it kind of leads us to like, oh, right, our own history. And so, how can we bring some compassion and kindness to the little kid within us at all times that may need something, right? If there was some unmet need that we had as kids, and sometimes we tumble through life still trying to get that need met. Again, how much can we know ourselves, love ourselves, and extend those things to ourselves, and also be brave to ask the people around us to support us with those things,
Yeah.
right? And again, the reason I love working with elementary kids is because there's the brain, right, is in a beautiful place of development. This is where we develop the words to speak in the language. And so anytime you see somebody getting bullied or hurt, again, at any age, and people ask, how come you didn't intervene? How come you didn't do anything? And the most common answer is, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And so what we do is we give kids language at the time of their life where they're in language development to be able to say things. I feel sad. I need a hug. Or, hey, do you need a friend? Do you need help? And these powerful words, even today as an adult, right? To be able to clearly be able to say, I feel angry. I need respect. To be able to clearly communicate our feelings, our needs, to be able to, we teach a beautiful forgiveness tool called the cleanup, because we all just make mistakes all the time, and we need a tool. We need the words to, how do I ask somebody for forgiveness when I hurt them in some way? And so these tools we know will last them a lifetime, or will help them in all their relationships, will help them in the workplace. And a few months ago, I was at the bank, depositing checks from schools, and the bank teller, is looking at the checks, and he's like, Soul Shop, Soul Shop. I think I know Soul Shop. And I'm like, oh, where do you know Soul Shop from? This is the bank teller. I had Soul Shop in element. You're the people who talk about feelings, right? The balloon. And I said, yes. And I'm like, do you remember? And he's like, yep. Every girlfriend I've ever had, I talk about the balloon.
The ripple effect. So,
So the ripple. Yeah.
so,
So I,
so you have helped over 1 million children
yeah.
in your time. I bet it felt like it just went by in a flash.
Yes. Yeah, sure. For sure.
What was it like the moment I know recently you added the numbers up and you were like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're a nonprofit that has, annual reports every year, and It's like always, I think, big dream to, reach whatever number of people that you have a vision to want to reach, and so a million's been just kind of dangling there. At some point, we knew we'd reach it. And so I remember just adding up these numbers and in a spreadsheet. And again, I really in my mind thought we got to be at least a couple 100,000 off, but we're close. And and I'm like, but this is going to be the year. This is the year we're going to reach a million, and whatever that number is, we're going to fill that gap this year and do it. And so when I added up the numbers, and it was over a million that we hit like a year and a half ago. I was like,
So you
wow.
you think about that. I mean, I know they're all not bank tellers, but metaphorically, you could have a
Yeah.
million bank tellers, like, which is so powerful. What is the vision going next now? You've reached that. What's the next big hopes and dreams for where Soul Shop goes?
Yeah, I would love to be able to train people to do what we do in other areas. So we're looking at licensing, bringing our programs to other places, being able to, again, create little hubs around the country so that people can bring Soul Shop into their school communities a little easier, and do some in-person programming that we do a lot of here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We do fly to schools and do school assemblies and school workshops and other places. And the vision is to be able to create some different places around the country for people to set up their own shop.
Oh, I love that. I'm like, my whole brain's like, I just got through elementary school and high school, like, so mamas that are listening, if you have contacts or questions or people that might be interested as well to bring it in as a program itself, I encourage you to reach out. And Vicki, I'm going to ask you, where can everyone get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to find us is go to our website, which is soulshop.org, and it's SOULSHOPPE.org. And there's a lot of beautiful, great resources there for you. A lot of free resources. So if you want to learn about our bully prevention series or our beautiful social emotional learning curriculum called Tools of the Heart, all of that information is on our website there.
Oh, I love that so much. And we'll make sure that all of the contact information and links are in the show notes below. So we're at that time where we wrap up our episode, and I want to give this floor to you. What are your I just feel like there's a message, like cohesive message that wants to come through that you would love to share and leave us with for not only our kids but ourselves as adults moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Everybody listening, we all have our own paths and we all have our own journeys that started with us being little people,
Mhm.
little versions of ourselves. And I just am sending so much love and care to every single one of those young hearts that has now grown into an adult's beautiful you. And so I, again, just come back to how can you love that little kid in you, remind that little kid of how brilliant and wise and wonderful that they are, and let that little kid, help you to shine even brighter.
Mm, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time and for being here
You.
today. What a beautiful episode. And yeah, I think we can all always pour in a bit more kindness, a bit more love, and a bit more compassion because you just never know what someone else is going through. And for your own self, you are allowed to create an extraordinary life, and it begins with the love that's felt within. So, thanks again for being here, Vicki. I'll
Thanks for
talk to you
having me,
guys
Michelle.
next week. All right. Bye for now.